Well, the Washington Post broke a big story today. It turns out, after serving as President Obama's 2008 campaign manager, David Plouffe accepted a $100,000 speaking fee from a company that does business with the government of Iran. The company is a subsidiary of the MTN Group, a South Africa-based telecommunications company, and the article states that Plouffe was paid for 2 speeches he made in Nigeria in December 2010. It also goes on to suggest that although he did nothing that was illegal, for a close Obama aide to have accepted payment from a company involved in Iran could prove troublesome for the president as the White House toughens toward the Islamic Republic. Iran, of course, one of the biggest chief Romney, just back from a trip, he pledged the utmost support. And a couple months ago at a campaign event, also criticizing the president for his lack of action against Iran.
This is a president who has failed to put in place crippling sanctions against Iran. He's also failed to communicate that military options are on the table, in fact, in our hand, and that it's unacceptable to America for Iran to have a nuclear weapon.
So how big of a smoking gun is this, really? I'm joined now by Jamal Abdi, Policy Director for the National Iranian-American Council. And Jamal, let's talk about this. I mean, to what extent do you think this is actually troublesome?
Well, it is troublesome for the Obama campaign, and I hope that the irony is not lost on people, that this is a president who's being criticized by Mitt Romney for being too soft on Iran, and yet he's passed the strongest Iran sanctions, the strongest sanctions, frankly, that's ever been imposed on any company, on any country, and they're so broad that his own top political advisor is now being ensnared in the sanctions. So, either the sanctions are too broad and are having a counterproductive effect, or this president has actually been pretty tough on Iran to the extent that even his own guys are now being sucked up in this nonsense.
Yeah, under this current round of sanctions, I mean, wouldn't David Plouffe be in direct violation of some of what the Obama administration's put out there?
Well, the thing is that this company that he spoke for, it's a subsidiary of a larger company, the largest telecom company in Africa, MTN. He spoke for a Nigerian subsidiary of that company. Neither of these companies are actually sanctioned at this time. Now, there's a lot of talk that they will be sanctioned in the future because pretty much if you're doing business inside of Iran, there's going to be a way to connect you to a sanctioned entity. That's just the way it is right now. And so the fact of the matter is, in the near future, he may actually have spoken for a company that is going to be sanctioned. Retroactively, though, it doesn't necessarily make sense.
And you use, the word, it's ironic or whatever here, but there are countless examples. I think the biggest thing for me is that this is not that out of the ordinary. There are countless examples of lobbying firms here in Washington, that work with countries believed to be, quote-unquote enemies of the United States. There's also Richard Pearl, who worked both under President Ronald Reagan and under President George W. Bush. This is a man who made at least a couple trips to Libya to have many meetings with Colonel Muammar Gaddafi. And I want to show you just really quickly how this story was portrayed by at least one of the mainstream outlets here in the U.S.
A shocking report this morning. President Obama's senior advisor cashing in on doing business with a firm linked to Iran's government.
So why is this so shocking?
Look, a few months ago, it was the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee that was hitting the Koch brothers for their millions of dollars of investments in Iran's petrochemical industry, which is now sanctioned. Just a few years prior, this whole incident reminds me of in 2007 when Mitt Romney was on the campaign trail the first time. He was writing these public letters to folks like then Senator Clinton and other senators and governors calling for them to divest from Iran. Well, then it came out that Bain & Co. actually had invested in Iran's oil company and actually was working on a strategy to make the NIOC, which is now sanctioned, to make them the largest oil company in the world. And so this is I think campaigns playing with fire because these sanctions are sucking everybody into them. They're so broad that there are very few folks who actually you can't find 6 degrees of separation between them and the Iranian government.
It really is a small world after all. What about, Jamal, the fact that for every rule there seem to be a lot of exceptions? I know I recently interviewed California Congressman Dana Rohrabacher about the fact that China has been given a waiver. China is one of the few countries that's been given a waiver, you know, even though China does still import oil from Iran. I want to play what he said when I asked him about this.
There's a horrible double standard that we have. We have heaped on Russia all kinds of requirements and restrictions and mandates if they're going to get anything, even if it's the repeal of Jackson-Vanik, which should have been done 20 years ago, much less most favored nation status, while China has had no liberalization at all. And Russia has had enormous liberalization. Their churches are full now, and you do have opposition groups and opposition papers in Russia. You got nothing like that in China whatsoever.
You know, so let's not focus on China, but let's just focus on the fact that even when the U.S. makes rules regarding Iran, there are always exceptions to those rules.
Look, the hypocrisy here right now is at level 11 because, for instance, even Mr. Rohrabacher himself is somebody who, if you look into his campaign donations, is taking money from a designated foreign terrorist group, the MEK, which is an Iranian exile group that is dedicated to overthrowing the Iranian government, but relies on terror to accomplish its goals. Mr. Rohrabacher is one of a number of officials, including officials working for the Romney campaign, who is taking the same speakers' fees from this group, from a group that is designated as a terrorist group, in order to advance their political agenda. And at the end of the day, it's money that's driving these things. It's politics. It's, you know, with the MEK example, it's not getting the same type of scrutiny because this is an organization that supposedly wants to overthrow the Iranian government. And because of that, because Iran is this boogeyman, the enemy of our enemy is our friend, so somebody like Dana Rohrabacher can go ahead and speak for a terror group like that.
Well, that's my last question, really. I mean, when we talk about this boogeyman of Iran, this is nothing new. Iran has been, you know, kind of the bad guy for not years, but decades here. So are presidents, are lawmakers just simply passing the buck when it comes to actually dealing with Iran?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that this is really an example of how the sanctions have been an excuse to not actually resolve the tough problems that we do have with Iran and to make the tough decisions that need to be made, such as actually pursuing a serious engagement and diplomatic strategy. In lieu of making those tough decisions, we've relied pretty much exclusively on sanctions, and now for the Obama administration and campaign, the chickens are sort of coming home to roost in that they themselves are now getting swept up in the politicization of our foreign policy and in the sort of fetishization of the sanctions against Iran.
Seems to be a never-ending process here. Always good to have your insight. Jamal Abdi, Policy Director for the National Iranian American Council. Thanks.
Thank you.